to Women Work Your Faith. My name is Sylvia Johnson, and today I'm going to review the Sunday School Lesson for Sunday, September the 29th. Our title for Sunday, September the 29th is Rejoice Anyway. The Bible basis for this Sunday's lesson is Habakkuk, the second chapter, the 1st through the 5th verse, and the third chapter, the 17th through the 19th verse. The Bible truth is not, Job, the psalmist, and Habakkuk all affirm that no matter what calamities might come their way, they will trust God, rejoice in God's presence in their lives, and praise God for strength to carry on. So I think our Bible truth is going to collect some of the lessons that are coming up because Job is next week. Our memory verse, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And that's Habakkuk, the 3rd chapter, the 17th and the 18th verse. The lesson aims for this Sunday's Sunday School lesson are, by the end of the lesson, your students will hear God's message of patience for the people and assurance that God will act with justice. Experience the feeling of joy when we have patiently awaited God's promises, and practice responding to difficulties by trusting in God's presence and by praising God for strength to endure. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. I got tripped up on the Bible truth because I was reading the future lessons and I was like, did I not turn my page? But this lesson is going to be, I think, short and to the point. Maybe there'll be some discussion of things that come to mind later. But it's an interesting lesson because you don't often, Habakkuk is a short book in the Bible, 3 chapters. And so if you have time to read all the commentary that is in your Sunday school book, then you technically have time to just read the whole book of Habakkuk. And it's a pretty simple read, so it won't take you a long time to process and understand. But as you read it, you can parse it out and really apply what it is that's taking place. So Habakkuk was a prophet prior to captivity of Judah and exile. And he recognizes that things are not right among the people of God and that there is injustice and unrighteousness throughout the body. And so he questions God about it and what God's going to do about it. And God answers him. And much like with us, we see something, we question God about it, and God gives us a response. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That ain't what I thought you were going to say. That ain't the answer I wanted. And so God reveals to Habakkuk his plan for what's coming. And we've talked about that multiple times in the previous lessons with Jeremiah. Naturally so, Habakkuk is horrified. He does not like that answer. That's not going to work for me. And so he questions God's judgment. And not internally, like he questions God. He asks him and poses to him, how is this right? Who these people? And he tells God a little bit about the people that do wrong and are coming to be his rod of correction for the chosen people of God. And so our Sunday school lesson picks up there after Habakkuk has complained and questioned God's judgment, and is then waiting for God's response. A couple of things that I wrote down is he recognizes that God is God and that he has the authority to judge, but he is appalled at how God's going to do it. And we're that way, right? And that's why I said it's worth it to read the whole 3 chapters, because you'll see so much of how we think and how we swing emotionally and in our thought process when we're rationalizing what's going on. We look at something and we think we know how God should handle it. And we want to enlighten him on that sometimes. And so as we go through this lesson, think about, how God deals with us patiently. How he, comes and approaches us, and I'm gonna learn you a little something. Let me help you with this. Because he is righteous and he is just. So, even though his methodology may not appeal to us, it may seem harsh to us, he knows what he's doing. And so we're gonna go a little bit into this lesson and just see what it helps us do. So without further ado, let's get into the lesson. So we're starting in Habakkuk, the second chapter, the first verse. And it says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And so this is immediately following Habakkuk's dialogue to God after he has found out about his plans to correct the children of Israel and Judah, right? And so he's taking his position, his stance. So he's setting himself upon a watch. Basically, he's issued a challenge and he's waiting for the comeback, right? And he fully expects there to be a response from God. And it speaks to what's happening here, because you see the challenge that's been issued and how he's questioning God's judgment. But you also see the familiarity with God that he shows, his relationship with him, right? And so he expects God to answer him. He knows God's temperament and his character, right? And so he recognizes that he's challenged God, and not that he's waiting for a fight, but he's ready to defend his position. And we're like that. God, didn't you see these people? Didn't you see this? Didn't this go like this? And so he's here in this position where he doesn't understand or see why God is doing. But you also recognize the relationship there, that they are engaging in this dialogue together. And so God answers him, right? Oh, I have a note here. There's a movie that I watched, and it made me think of this when I was studying this and just kind of meditating on what was happening. In the movie, the woman comes to know God, and then she has all these hard times and all of these experiences that are going wrong, and she gets angry. And she's in this church, and she's screaming, and she's crying, and she's frustrated. And the priest lets her go through all of those things. And then he sits down and he talks to her, and she was like, I'm sorry. And I think he tells her, it's hard to be mad at someone you don't believe in. And, the light comes on for her that, wait a minute, I am talking to God. I trust him enough to question and ask him these things and expect him to answer me and to make them right. And, so knowing that frustration, that angst, that tension you feel when things aren't right and you don't like the way things are going to go, but also, as I say to myself, I don't have any better sense but to complain to God about it, right? And so you open up and you let all of that out, and you trust that he will respond to it. And so that's what happens here with Habakkuk, right? And so it says in the second chapter, verse 2, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon the tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. So in this moment where Habakkuk is, kind of in this defensive stance, kind of, and waiting for God to answer how he's questioning his judgment, God tells him to take down this revelation I'm going to give you. Write it down and write it plainly, so that the message can be taken and carried quickly to the one who should receive it. And that's important because God is giving his word for what he is going to do. Now, Habakkuk feels that God's judgment is harsh and that it's not right for the unrighteous to chastise the righteous. And how are they going to do that and get away with it, right? Why is it okay for them and all the wrong and the damage that they do and harm to people, that they would get away with that? And what God is going to reveal to him, and it's not all in the lesson, is that he's very much aware of who these people are and how they are, and that he's going to work out things so that they don't triumph in what they're doing. And so what he's promising him is that I'm going to give you this revelation. I'm going to speak to you this truth. I'm going to let you in on what I'm doing. And you take it down and mark my words, because I guarantee you it's going to happen. And so it says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time. So in this day and age, when there's a message, we've got email, text message, UPS, USPS, very quickly we relay messages, and we live in a world of instant gratification, right? We want to see it right now. In that day and age, messages were carried by people very slowly on foot, maybe on an animal, a four-legged animal. And things did not happen quickly. And even more so with some of the things that God had promised. And so there was always a delay. But what God is promising him here is that it's not a delay. Though you have to wait for it, it is going to come, and it's going to come at the time that it is supposed to occur. And that is something that we can trust in with God. It appears to us that things are slow moving. It appears to us that things aren't happening, but God's word is certain. He has promised that he will do it. And so in this instance, he's going to tell Habakkuk how he's going to correct and take care of those who are coming in judgment of Israel, right? But in that moment, it doesn't seem like that's the way it's going to be. We can trust God's word. And he says, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. So we will sit and think, God's not going to do it. This isn't going to happen. Last night we have a Bible study group for my church. We call it Fellowship Night, and we talk about different topics. And we talk about what happens when we move on things, and whether, we act in fear or apprehension and things like that, and what that really means. And it means you don't trust God, right? And all throughout the Bible, what God is trying to do is teach us to trust him, teach us to believe him, teach us to take him at his word. And so here he's given that again, right? Take this revelation I'm going to give you. Mark it down clear on tablets. Though it may seem delayed, it's not. It's coming at its appointed time. Wait, it's going to happen. And so moving forward, he continues to speak. Going to the second chapter of Habakkuk, verse 4. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. So he's referring to this nation, the Chaldeans, who are coming. And it says, his soul which is lifted up. So he thinks highly of himself. And not just, I'm a great person. This nation was brutal. They were savage. And they were conquerors. They thrilled in that. And that's how they grew as a nation. And what God is saying, but his soul is not right within him. Within him is not good. His judgment, his core of his being, his morals and his convictions, they're not right. But the just, those who are right, in my eyes, talking about God, they live by faith. So the Chaldeans lived by their own acts, by their own might, their own strength. What they judged was right, what they judged was good or worth indulging in. They were conquerors, and they reveled in their own strength. But what God is saying is the true people who are good live by their faith. What does it mean to live by your faith? That is your steadfast, unwavering, and continuous trust in God. And it's not that, oh yeah, I believe God. I believe God exists, or I believe Jesus is real. It is how you trust him. It is, do you believe what he has spoken over your life? And this is what we were talking about last night in our Bible study group. Do you believe what he said about you? Do you believe what his promises are? Because that's what he's telling Habakkuk to do. Write down what I said. Because the just will live by his faith, by his trust in my word. Think about examples of this in the Bible, right? If you think about Jesus being tempted when he came out of the wilderness and he was a hungered, and the serpent, not the serpent, well, it was the enemy, told him, turn that stone into something to eat. And he says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. He understood that while I could take for myself what I think I should have, that's not how you live. You should live, and how you move from day to day is by what God has spoken for you. If you think about David and Goliath, right? Everybody else was like, I'm not going over there. I'm not going over there. We're not fighting him. Goliath was taunting and mocking everybody. And little scraggly David walked up and was like, this ain't right. How was he able to defeat him? By his faith in God. And so he trusted God about what was right and just, and he moved on that. And so when we believe in God, not just believe that there is a God, how we live is different. And so I'm not puffed up and confident in myself like Goliath was, because Goliath was like, I'm a giant. Send whoever you want out here. I can take him. But he had to eat them words later, right? Well, he didn't really get to. His head got cut off. But think about that. How the person who is self-righteous and believes that in themselves is their ability to have and receive and do everything, in comparison to how God desires for us to live. And in that way, we trust him wholly for everything. We trust him to keep us in the right, to keep us safe, to teach us what is good, to provide for us all that we need. And so I live by my faith, even though I get up every day and I go to work, right? And I drive my car. Yes, I have a license. Yes, I wear my seatbelt, but I'm trusting God to keep me in that car. I'm trusting God to provide for me through that job. And so think about yourself and how you live and how you proceed from day to day. Where is your faith? Is there some faith? Are you trusting God? And so if we continue on to verse 5, it says, yea, also he transgresseth by wine. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. He greedy. Overindulgent, no self-control, never satisfied, arrogant, easily tempted. And so God is demonstrating, I know full well who these people are. Transgresseth himself by wine. He overindulges in alcohol, and it causes him to do things. And we know that when people get drunk, they do all kinds of things they should have never done and would not have done if their moral inhibitions had not been dulled by alcohol, right? A proud man neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell. And so talking about death and hell growing continuously, right? It's ever consuming. And so just as people are continuously dying, that's how these people are. They are continuously consuming more and more, more and more, taking more. And they're never satisfied. There's never a point where they say that's enough. I'm done. I'm going to stop doing this. And so that example, the heaping together of all nations, nothing is enough to make them content. And so God describes them in contrast to what we know him to be and what his desire is for his people, his believers, right? We're not supposed to be like that. we're supposed to have some temperance. We're supposed to be sober. And being sober, meaning being in control of yourself and aware and vigilant. Not just, just dull, but we should be in better control of ourselves. We should be humble. We're not here just to consume. We're here to produce. That was the commandment God gave in the beginning, right? Be fruitful and multiply. These people are consuming. So we have to remember that God is aware of how people are. He's aware of what they're doing, and he's got to work for that. And he's got a plan to correct it. And so his answer, and you can continue reading through chapter 2 in your own time. But his answer to Habakkuk is that I've got something for them. Okay. And so afterwards, when you continue on, we are going to skip for the lesson to Habakkuk chapter 3. And in the 17th verse, it says, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat, the flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will joy in the God of my salvation. So this is our memory verse. Verses, rather, because there's 2 verses. And so Habakkuk 3 is a continuation, sort of the dialogue, except now his tone has changed. God has answered him, and so he gives a response back, and it's a prayer. And I think our Sunday school book, and maybe I think my study Bible says it too. It's written as a psalm, and now he's in the prayer prior to where our memory verse picks up. He's speaking of who God is. Now, before, he was complaining about how the children of Israel and Judah were acting. Then he was complaining about the people who were going to come to conquer the nations. And now he's turning and he's recalling who God is. And he's talking about how God has delivered his people. He's talking about the wonder of God and how he came and moved in the earth to deliver his people. And so he's also talking about how he feels and the trembling and the way that he knows that the judgment of God is going to be, because he's aware that they've sinned. And when the day of the Lord comes, it comes with justice and to bring judgment. And so he's got some trepidation here because this is going to happen. But then he says that although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be on the vines. So he's very much aware of what's coming. And the reason why this is so important is we talked about this last week in Deuteronomy 28. God told them in very clear detail that if they did not obey, here's what's going to happen. And so he said, I will send a nation. I'm going to send some people to come straighten y'all out. And they're going to wipe out everything. You're going to be desolate. They're going to take everything. And so Habakkuk is talking about what that looks like, right? At the heyday of the kingdom of Israel, they were prosperous. They had everything they needed. They were known across the land. And now he's describing this day of destitution. There's no fruit on the trees. The olive shall fail. What the olive tree does, the work, it's not going to happen. The fields, nothing. The flocks and all the cattle and everything that we have, gone. Because these people are going to, like we said, they're unsatisfied. They're going to wipe it out. Even in that situation, in that trepidation and that concern and that worry, I will rejoice in the Lord. Now, it sounds great. It sounds great. But think about it. If you woke up one morning and everything you had been taken away, everything that you had counted on to provide for you, to keep you safe, all of that was gone. Could you jump for joy and sing praises to God? What this is teaching you is that you should. And not only that, But in his situation, he recognizes, and as a man of God, he understands that we brought this on ourselves. This is God's judgment toward us. But even in that, I will still sing praises to him. I will still glorify his name. I will still be joyful in him. And it says, I will joy in the God of my salvation. And so it describes who he sees God is. He's still going to deliver us. So I'm here and I'm destitute. I have nothing. I've sinned against him and he sent judgment. But I'm going to be here and sing praises to his name because I know he'll deliver me. And we have to really develop that kind of relationship with God. That's the kind of intimacy he wants from his people. One, because he don't want to have to punish us. But two, we should trust him and trust who he is enough to know that he's going to be that always. And that goes back to him saying, write the vision and make it plain. Let me give you this revelation, because what he's going to do is prove himself to people. As you go back and you read what he's done, and what he's done is what he said he would do. And so we go on. Okay. To the last verse of the lesson. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon mine high places. So if you have a Sunday school book, I thought this was the best example of this. In the teacher's book, it's on page 50, but in the student book, it'll probably be a different page. It's the very last page of the lesson. It says, dig a little deeper, rejoice anyway. And it says, in hinds' feet on high places, Hannah Hunard declares that Christians have always longed for the power to surmount all difficulties and tests and conflicts in life, like exultant and triumphant gazelles. And so you're like, what in the world does that mean, right? When Habakkuk says, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, you have to remember that we live inside these houses in our own creations, and all we know of the world is the little bit we walk outside to see. But they lived in the world with God's creations. And so they depended on animals a lot more than we do. And so animals with hind legs relied on their hind legs for steadiness, for balance, for strength to pull, to move. And so something with hinds' feet was more sure-footed with something that only had 2 feet, okay? And the example in your Sunday school book that they use is the gazelle. Now, if you're like me and you're a nerd and you like to watch Animal Planet all the time, you've seen these gazelles flying on those 4 feet. And they leap over all kind of obstacles, including predators, right? And what your Sunday school book is talking to you about is how sure-footed a gazelle is. That a gazelle can have their 2 feet, and I hope you all can see this, and the front foot is in a place that's a sure step, and the hind legs, when the front foot moves, the hind leg can go exactly where that front foot was. What does that mean? If that was a sure spot, then this is moving into into the exact sure spot. You're not going to get tripped up. If you think about something that is climbing a mountain, if you've seen those goats that sit on the side of the mountain and look like a little itty bitty cliff, and the goats that are just standing there, right? You're not going to get tripped up. And so when you have, when he says that he will make my feet like hinds' feet, something that has hind legs like that, you're sure-footed. When you see the challenges that come, the high places, the obstacles that you have to overcome, if you're sure-footed, it won't be an issue. You don't see those mountain goats looking at the mountain like, I ain't going up there. No, they're going up there. They looking at you like, you ain't coming up here. You can try to run up here if you want to. And if a predator comes after them, they just take off running and go. And so we should be the same way. When we trust in the Lord and when we joy in him, our steps should be sure. We don't have to get shook and trip. And if you have sure steps and you're not tripped up, you don't fall. We should not fall especially not when we see God move. And he's like, don't worry about it. This is me. And we get all tripped up and fall out and like, I can't believe this is happening. God just told you it was him. We should be all right. And so he makes us sure-footed. He strengthens our walk. He helps us to stand and to overcome and walk above the things that challenge or frighten or disturb us. And so you can rejoice in the Lord for that. I hope I made that clear. Let me know. So going back to the lesson aim, it says, by the end of the lesson, your students will hear God's message of patience for the people and assurance that God will act with justice. So in our questionings, because we do it, right? We see injustice. We see hurt. Let's just be honest. This is September 2024. It's an election year. We're seeing all kind of shenanigans. And you're going to God like, how, what, why? What is going on? When are you going to straighten this out? But we can be sure that God is always just. I was praying to God about a situation for the last couple of months. And the answer God gave me, I was like, that's rough. I don't want to do that. That's not right. And I was kind of put out about it. You know, like, God, that's hard. Now, hold on. Wait a minute. And so I struggled with it. But he told me to do it and to trust him. And so I did it and I trusted him. Well, after I did it, it all became clear. When I saw what happened next, I understood that God sees down the line. God knows what's needed. And sometimes we think that his judgment is rough and that it's a little strong and heavy-handed. But remember that God is always working to make things right and to make things good. And so you can take assurance and trust that God is just and he will do what is right in every situation. Experience the feeling of joy when we have patiently awaited God's promises. So referring to what Habakkuk says in 3 and 17 and 18, right? In the period of wait for the promise, things can seem a little unpromising. And it looks like the promise has taken a detour and may not be coming. But what we can do is continue to rejoice in the Lord because he's still with us. Like God told Habakkuk, the vision is coming. It's assured. It is coming at its appointed time. You can take my words. I'm going to reveal it to you and you mark it down. It's on its way. Practice responding to difficulties by trusting in God's presence and by praising God for strength to endure. So, practice responding to difficulties. You don't have to practice responding to, you're going to get some difficulties. And much like in this situation, some of them are going to be your fault. Some of them are going to be decisions or actions that we've done that have resulted in us having to deal with the consequences. And I think I gave the example, if I didn't do it today, I did it before, of David when he numbered the people and God gave him 3 choices, how he was going to be dealt with. And David said, I'm going to surrender myself into your hand. I don't know them people like that. And so he trusted God to handle it. Whatever it was, whatever judgment came, he trusted God to handle it. And then when the judgment came, and it was hard, he threw himself on the mercy of the Lord. And so we have to remember that we need to trust in his presence. Even in that situation when God had issued judgment, David knew he was God and he knew he was still there. And so we have to trust him the same. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes, let's just be honest, sometimes people have sinned against God and they need to repent and come back. And the consequences of those decisions and the actions that they've done are there. We need to be joyful in the Lord that he's still God. He's still loving. He's still mercifully kind. He's still righteous. He's still long-suffering. He's still just. And so we can go to him and rejoice in that and understand that he will set you up like hinds feet. If you trust and praise and depend on him, he'll set you up so you won't get tripped up, so that you won't be stumbling over little pebbles and rocks. You'll be able to walk with a sure step in him. So that's all I got for the lesson today. I did want to point out just a little word of encouragement. Let your kids listen to gospel music, because as I read this, and anytime I read this or hear this in church or anywhere, when I was a little girl, my mom would listen all the time because she was in church. Reverend Clay Evans, I'm Going Through. And that I'll put it in the comments if I remember when I cut this off. At the end, the very end of the song, Reverend Clay Evans says, I heard the prophet say, though there be no fruit on the vine, no cattle in the stalls. And I said, hey, wait a minute. That's Habakkuk. As a child, I didn't know where they came from, right? But as we grow, you don't know what tidbits of what children hear they'll catch on to, right? And what will stick and come back up. And so for me, the memories that I have and the things that speak from in me are the things that I heard with my parents and the songs and the teachings and things like that. And so, you know, when you're playing music with your kids and stuff like that, you know, hey, play the good stuff and let them hear things that will feed them and that will nourish them. Because now I can understand what it was that he was singing when he was saying, I'm going through. That's what Habakkuk was getting prepared to go through, because they were really going to experience some hard times. But yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And now it makes a whole difference to actually understand what they were saying. So that's my little tidbit for today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you all understood the lesson and it was helpful for you. Be blessed, and if the Lord says the same, I'll see you next week in Sunday school. Take care and good night.